Thank you for reviewing our SurveyToGo Getting Started session. If you're viewing this session, we assume that you've already gone through a solution demo and registered your SurveyToGo account. You know at this stage that SurveyToGo is an offline CAPI hosted solution supported both on Android and Windows-based devices and is built around a set of quality control capabilities that allow you to boost your quality control processes, ensuring that only valid data is eventually included in your data processing outcomes. During this session, we will review the typical implementation process and usage. We will not discuss every function in details, but we'll go over the common components of the solution with a certain logical flow. As you will start using the solution, you will be able to consult our knowledge base and work with our support team on configuring and implementing this solution to match your exact processes and needs. The following topics is what we're going to follow during this session. We're going to start with covering the support portal, where you would be able to access our knowledge base and be able to contact our support when needed. We'll then move to the account configuration, starting with users, then customers and projects. We'll see how you create a simple survey, what are survey modes. We'll look at the designer. We'll then continue and see how you create surveyors in your organization and how you associate them to specific projects. And then we'll move to view the data collection application. Specifically, we're going to look at the Android application and see how the application is installed, configured, and what are the surveyors seeing when they work with the application on a project. Then we're going to move to look at the various ways to monitor, control, and manage the data that is collected during your projects. We're going to look at the dashboards that are available, the KPIs and the fieldwork reports. We're going to see how quota is being monitored during a project. We'll then look at data management and quality control using the operations console of the studio. We'll eventually move to data exporting and show you how you export the data that was collected in a specific project using the export wizard. And finally, we're going to look at what storage is in SurveyToGo and how you can manage that storage space. We're going to recap with discussing on where do you continue from here after this session, and what are your sources to get access to additional knowledge and contacting us for questions, assistance, support, etc. Before we begin looking at the solution itself, one of the most important things I want you to take out of this session is making you aware of our support portal. With the online customer support portal, you can submit and manage your support request and access our knowledge base. Our knowledge base is structured with specific sections such as samples, user guides, how to frequently asked questions guides, troubleshooting, etc. This is of course a searchable knowledge base, so anything that you would be thinking of looking for, you'd be able to find here using the search. For example, how do I install the various components? You can simply type in install and you'll see that you're directed to various short guides that will direct you to what you are looking for. Either it's the studio installation or the other components of the solution. Let's click, for example, on the how to install SurveyToGo Studio on additional computers, and we'll be directed to a short guide that directs us to the installation link, and will provides as well certain points that are related to that studio installation. Using the support portal, you can also submit support requests. You can simply go to submit a request and you'll be directed to a submit a request form where you'll be able to specify your email address, the organization name, the description of the issue, etc. Once you complete it, you simply click on this submit button and the support request will be opened and will appear on our support system that is constantly being reviewed by our support team. The support team will then review the request and get back to you with the answer. All the support requests that you've opened and or resolved can be then tracked under the existing requests. From here you would be able to track your existing open requests and see where they are, and what was the relevant corresponding related to each of those requests, and you'll also be able to get back and consult support requests that were submitted by you a while ago and received a response, and perhaps you are looking for what was the response, you're not remembering, you want to see a specific detail that perhaps was in one of the responses that we provided. So you can always do that from here. In order to be able to do that, you will need to sign up your username in our support portal, so that every time you log in, you're gonna be directed to your specific context. An additional way to open a support request is simply sending us an email to support@duplo.com specifying what the issue is, and behind the scene that email is also going to be treated by the system, and the system is going to create a support request for that that specific description that is included in the email. Let's now move to the solution and log into the studio with the user that we used when registering the account. If you've registered an account, you've probably also followed the SurveyToGo Studio installation. The SurveyToGo Studio is the management component of the solution, and the application that is used by the back office staff, such as the administrators, project managers, quality control, data processing, etc. So I'm at the stage that I've just registered my SurveyToGo account, and I'm going to use my user that I used during the registration to log into the studio for the first time. On the left side, you can see the organization structure that is appearing on the studio. You can see my SurveyToGo account, that is the account name that I used when registering this account. So the first thing that you do after you've registered an account is probably define the additional users for the various organization functions that will be using SurveyToGo. The users can be generally distinguished into two main categories: people who are involved in the administration of the account, for example, responsible for adding users, setting permissions, etc., and project-specific resources such as scripters, quality control teams, project managers, etc. Adding new users in SurveyToGo is done by going to the Studio and Users node, going to the Users node, As you can see right now, I only have one user, which is the user that was created when I registered the account. Right-clicking the users node and selecting create a new user. Let's add 2 users to our account. Just as an example, let's add David. For the sake of the session, we're gonna just leave David with an empty password. Let's also create another user named Mark, and let's give Mark a password. As you can see, adding additional users to the account is fairly easily, and is done by right-clicking the users node and selecting create a new user. This is, by the way, the best practice that is going to be followed throughout the solution. On every item that you're going to be seeing on the organization tree, right-clicking the item would open up the menu that is relevant for the context of that specific item. So for users, we're going to get the users menu. If we're going to be right-clicking a user, we're going to be getting the user-specific menu. As you can see, there are 2 nodes that look slightly similar. And the first one is the studio users, and the second is the surveyor users. The studio users would normally be your organization back office people, as mentioned. Those are going to be the people that are going to be using the SurveyToGo Studio on a regular basis for performing their work, while the surveyors are going to be using the data collection application on a daily basis to conduct interviews and working in the field. So the surveyors are typically not going to be not going to use the studio, but are going to use the data collection application, while the studio users are going to be the ones using the studio, management studio, to perform their work. So as I mentioned, the additional users that we've just created will be using the studio as their working application, and we'll need it to be installed on their laptops or PCs. So where do we find the installation link of the studio? As I showed you earlier, you'll be able to find most of the things that you'll be looking for, either installation related, usage, configuration, implementation, etc., on the knowledge base. So if we'll go to the knowledge base, support.doobler.net, and place in the searchable field studio install, we'll be directed to the short guide that includes the installation link as well. Simply take the installation link, copy it, send it to your additional users, ask them to paste it on the URL line of the browser, and the installation installation process of the studio will start. And at the end, they will have the studio installed on their PCs. I will now get back to the studio, and the next thing that I will typically want to do is set up the permissions of the various users that I've just created. As mentioned, your users will have various roles, so you will set up different permission sets for those specific users. This is done through the security node. I also mentioned that you will have users with account administration type responsibilities, while other users are going to have project specific related responsibilities. Let's open the Security Designer form and see how you set the permissions of the various user types. The first thing that we're going to review are the security roles. You can see that there are two types of security roles. One is an organization-wide administration type permissions, and the other is project specific. You can see that they have a different logo associated with each one of the role types. You can see that the security model that comes with SurveyToGo already includes several security roles, but you can also add your own roles if the roles that come with the solution do not exactly meet your organization, or you have additional roles in your organization and want to create specific permission sets for those roles. So let's look, for example, on what a organization security admin has in terms of permissions. So you can see that the organization security admin role permission set has the ability to access the security node that we're just working with, access the studio users and groups and define additional users, and similarly for the surveyors node. You can see on the left side that all the sections are organization-wide related and are mainly related to administration type of permissions. If we'll select a project related permissions role, then you'll see that we're going to receive different sections that are project specific. For example, the dashboards, the quotas, the surveys, etc. As I mentioned, those are the default security roles that SurveyToGo comes with. But if you want to add your own roles, then you can easily do that by those two buttons. Here you add the organization type permission roles, and with this button you have the ability to add additional project related permission roles. There's one last thing on that form. I wanted to show you that every time that you click on a specific permission item, you can see on the bottom part the description of what does the item refers to, and then what are the non-read, write, and full permissions relate to with regards to that specific item. So those were just the security roles. After we have defined our various security roles that our organization will include, then we need to go and assign our users the specific roles that they are going to play, either in the organization context or on a specific project context. For the moment, we're going to discuss the organization specific context. So we'll move to the security assignments, and as we mentioned, we created David to be an additional organization administrator of the account. I registered the account, but I want an additional user to be a co-administrator of the account with me. So what will I do? What I need to do is simply select David, mark David to play the role of the organization administrator, click on the assign selected, and you can see that now David is an organization administrator. I will now save the changes. And what I've just done is made David another organization administrator aside myself, who registered the account and is the account owner, so obviously also have the administrative rights on the account. As you can see, we didn't give Mark any organization wide role, because Mark is not going to be serving any administrative role on the organization wide, but Mark is going to play specific roles on specific projects that we're going to then create. We can now close the security section and move to our next step that will probably follow after we've created our users. I'm going to close the Studio Users and Groups node, and I'm going to move to the Customers and Projects node. All the projects that you will be running and their corresponding scripts, data, etc. will be structured under the Customers and Projects node. Under it, you define your customers, and under each customer, you define the respective projects you run for that specific customer. If you want to create a new customer, you simply right-click the Customers and Projects node and add a new customer. Let's call it My Customer. And as you see, a new customer named My Customer was created under the Customers and Projects group. Here you're going to define your customers, so the customers that you're going to be performing market research work for. As you can see, each new account has a demo customer that is created by default when the account is created. Under each customer, you will then see the projects that you're going to be performing for that specific customer. To add a new project in a specific customer, simply right-click the project and select Projects. Let's call the project My Project. And we're going to see that a new project is created under My Customer. As I mentioned earlier, there are users that serve as organization-wide roles, while other users have project-specific responsibilities. In the project that I've just created, I want to define Mark as my project manager. The way I'm going to do it is by right-clicking the project and selecting Security Settings. With the security settings of each project, I can define who's responsible for what in that specific project. I can define Mark to be the project manager. Let's define Mark to be also a quality control person. So Mark is going to be serving as project manager and a quality control person in that specific project. So after I've selected Mark, marked the specific project roles that I want Mark to have in this specific project, I'm gonna select the Assign Selected, and you'll see that with the project manager and quality control, I almost have a full control on what's gonna what I'll be able to perform with that specific project. The only thing that I will not have access to, and we'll see it later, is the ability to change or add the scripts that are going to be created under that project. this is the responsibility of the scripters that are going to be building the scripts. After I've done that, I'll need to save my changes. And that concludes the steps that are required when defining specific users to have specific roles on a specific project. Let's open the project node, and we'll see that the project contains several components. The first part that we're going to be focusing on is the surveys. The survey script is going to basically be the heart of the project work, and that will be normally the first step that you're going to be doing while creating a new project for your customer. That would be just after defining the specific permissions and roles of the users participating in the project. The next step that you're going to do is build the survey script from your questionnaire. That work is normally done by your scripting department, by your scripters. We're not going to go deeply into how you build scripts from questionnaires, but we're mainly going to cover the important aspects of how this is done and what does every participant of the project needs to understand with regards to the surveys themselves. So as I mentioned, the first thing that we're going to do just after creating the roles is creating a new survey. How do we create a new survey in a project? By right-clicking on My Projects and selecting Add a New Survey. I'm going to give my survey a name. I'm going to click Finish, and in a second a new survey is going to be created under my project. As you can see, there's a new survey that has been created under my project called My Survey. Let's create a very simple survey show. So we show you how the scripting work is performed. So just so we illustrate shortly how this is done, we're going to build a very simple one. So as you can see, the survey designer is built into three main sections. The left part is the survey tree, where you're going to be seeing all the chapters and questions that are part of the survey. On the middle part, you're going to be accessing the configuration that is relevant for each of the items. So if I'm on the survey node, then what I'm going to see is the configuration context of the survey. If I'm standing on a chapter, then I'm going to be entering the specific configuration section of the specific chapter, and the same is going to be for questions when we will start adding them. On the right side, you see the preview pane, where you can basically see how your survey looks like. And so let's start adding several questions to our survey. Adding questions to our survey is done by clicking the question menu, selecting new, and selecting one of the question types that are available in SurveyToGo. Let's first add an open-ended question and have it as what is your name. Let's add another question for gender. So either male or female, so we're going to select the single choice question. So enter the question text and add male and female. As I'm building it, you can see that on the center part, every time that I select a question, I'm directed to the configuration section of that specific question. So the question text, the answers. In this context, it's an open-ended question, so the configuration that are available for an open-ended question, and the other configurable parts for each of the questions. So the central part is the configuration section, and on the right side you can always see how my survey looks like. So let's assume that I can now see that the text pane is the text field is too large, and I wanna decrease it slightly. So I'm just gonna select that the text box mode. I want it to be a single line, and this is how it is going to look like on my device when the question is going to be run within the interview. Let's add another question that is going to represent the age ranges of our respondents, and we will name it age range, and we'll give the answers under 18, 19 to 40, 41 to 65, and over 65. And you can see how the question looks like on the emulator. If I want to see how it's going to look like on a different type of device and screen size, etc., I can always change it here. I can always that's going to be a 7-inch horizontal view, and that's how it's going to look like on a 5-inch horizontal view. I'm going to revert back to the vertical 5-inch view. Now I'm going to add another question of type single choice, and I'm going to ask, how are you today? And provide several answers like good, not bad, so, and bad. And I'm going to add it to my survey, and I'm going to add another one last question that is only going to be displayed. And once I've finished creating my survey, I'm gonna save it. As mentioned, SurveyToGo comes with a quality control set of capabilities. One of them I'm gonna just define right now. I'm just simply gonna go to the quality control tab of the interview, and I'll say that I want this interview to be flagged, to be marked for the quality control team if the duration of the interview is less than 1 minute, because 1 minute is not reasonable. An additional thing that I would want to configure for my survey are quotas. I'm going to be using the quota sheets in SurveyToGo. So the quota sheets allow me to very simply with a click and drag the ability to define my from simple to very complex quotas. Let's see how this is done. So let's assume that I want to define my quota to be a gender age range related. So I'm going to define it as simply going to select the gender and click the add to the rows. And if I want it tabular to be gender and age range dependent, then I'm going to also select the age range and click the add to columns. You've seen how easy it is to create such quotas, and the mechanism allows me to create some much more complex quotas, interlocked quotas, in almost any structure that I would need to build the sample. You've seen how I have defined the quality control flag to flag the interview if the duration of the interview would be less than 1 minute. Another capability that SurveyToGo brings in is the ability to record the entire or a part of an interview. So the question, how are you today, is very important for me in this survey. So I would want to record silently record the conversation, the question that is being asked by my surveyor, and the response that is given by the respondent, because I want my quality control team to be able to listen on it and see if the question was asked properly as I instructed the surveyor to ask it, and whether there was actually a discussion happening around this question as I have briefed my surveyor. To do that, I can simply go to the quality control tab and mark the enable silent audio recording. So after I've done those additional changes that were setting up my quotas and enabling the silent recording of that specific question, I'm going to save my survey again. During the survey creation, the scripter is basically using both the preview to see how the question looks like on the specific devices that are going to be used. In addition, he has the ability to test the survey. This is done by the emulator that is present on the top part of the preview pane. And if you click on the Run in Emulator, then my survey would basically start running as if it was running on a data collection application. It is not identical one-to-one to the data collection application, but it provides a very, very good and complete solution for scripters to be able to test their logic while they're designing the survey. So I will simply fill in the data. I will select gender and the age range, so you can see how I can check that my logic and behavior actually behaves as I intended to script it, and that it corresponds to the questionnaire. The emulator also provides some more logging, etc. capabilities that the scripters are often using while testing the logic during this survey design. I'm going to simply close the emulator. So we have our survey ready. We've designed it, we've tested it with the emulator, and we're basically ready with the survey. From our perspective as scripters, we've completed our work, and we have a script that corresponds to the questionnaire that we received to script. And the next thing that would basically happen on a project after you finished building your survey would be to assign your surveyors. The surveyors are going to be the ones that would use the data collection application to actually execute the survey. that I've just created and conduct interviews with it. So the first step when we want to assign surveyors to a specific project, we want those surveyors to be performing and conducting interviews on that project, would be to go to the Surveyors Users node, right-clicking the Users node and selecting Create a New User. I'm going to create a new surveyor that is called My Surveyor. Let's give this surveyor a password and click on the select. And as you can see, a new surveyor was added to my surveyors group, surveyors node. As you can see, the surveyors have two nodes under the main node. The first one is the users that we've just saw, and in which you add your surveyors. The second one is groups. You can group your surveyors into groups. For example, you can define 4 groups: surveyors south, surveyors north, surveyors east, and surveyors west, and associate the surveyors that you have in your organization to each one of those groups. The advantage is that you will later be able to utilize those groups when performing assignments to specific projects. So if a specific project needs to be conducted on the west part of the country, then you'll be able to simply assign the group that is called West Surveyors to that project. We'll see how it is done in 1 second. Rather than assigning each one of the surveyors that take part of this team manually, which may lead to forgetting surveyors, and in addition to that, the other advantage is if you have a new surveyor that is joining that West Surveyors group, then the only thing that you need to do is simply add the surveyor to that group, and automatically that surveyor would be assigned to all the surveys and projects that the West group has been assigned to. So you would not need to go project by project and add that surveyor to the assigned surveyors of those projects. Let's just define a one sample group and call it as you've seen, and as you probably know by now, right-clicking the groups would open the groups menu, and let's add a new group that is called West Surveyors, and let's associate My Surveyor to that group. And you can see that I have the West Surveyors group created under the groups node. So that was the first part. The first part was to create the surveyor, and if required, to also create the define the groups that my surveyors belong to and associate them to those groups. After we've done that, the next thing that we're going to do is we're basically going to assign that specific surveyor or that specific group to my project that I've created. And to do that, what I'll need to do is, again, right-click the surveyors node that is under the project, click on Add Surveyor, and you can see here that I have the option to either add surveyors or groups, and I can define what do I want to see in that specific view. So I only want to display groups, or I only want to display users. Let's get back to displaying both, and let's select the group. As mentioned, by default, when I selected the group, automatically all the surveyors that belong to that group would be assigned to that project. So we've created our survey and we've added the surveyors to the project. The next thing that we would probably want to do is set the relevant quota targets for those surveyors. You remember that we've defined quotas for the survey that we've created. Defining quota targets, and then also we'll see that in the second part of the session, monitoring the quota progress of a project is done through the quotas node. Let's double click the quotas node and select my survey. And as you can see, I have a structure that that represents the quota structure that I've just created, and you can see that I have on the surveyors list the surveyors that are part of the project. By default, the person who created the project is also being defined as an assigned surveyor, but that person can be that user can be removed from the list. Let's go to the editing tab of the quotas, and let's just set our target. So we want Daniel to perform 20 interviews. I want Daniel to interview 10 males under 18 and 10 females in the ages of 19 to 40. Then I want my surveyor to conduct 25 interviews of males in the ranges 19 to 40, and then 15 females in the age ranges of 41 to 65. And once I've completed setting up my targets, the next thing that I'm going to do, I'm going to save my changes. A specific aspect of a survey under a project that I want to discuss is the survey modes. Let's go back to the survey designer. As you can see, the surveys node includes three sub nodes: draft, active, and closed. When a survey is created, it is in draft mode. So every survey is created initially in draft mode. In draft mode, you would build your survey, design it as we did, add the relevant questions and build the logic. And testing your survey while in the design phase is done by using the emulator, as we've seen as well. As long as the survey is in draft mode, it is not synced to the devices, meaning that you will not see them on the data collection app if you log in, even with an assigned surveyor, to the app on a device. Once your design is done and the survey is ready, then you can move it to test mode. You can see on the top part that there's the ability to move a survey to test mode, either from within the survey designer or by right-clicking a survey, selecting the settings, and checking the test checkbox. In test mode, surveys start getting synced to your devices and can be testing on the devices themselves. you can run the survey on the devices and see exactly how it will look like when used by the surveyors, and how the collected results would look like. Once you've done with your testing and you're satisfied with the survey, you can then move it to production mode. Once the survey is in production mode, it is ready for real data collection. Both test and production mode surveys are synced to the devices. The difference is that in test mode, your results will be marked as test results. They would be marked with a special flag, so that you know you are in test mode, and only the last 10 results that are being uploaded from the devices while in test mode are kept. All the other results are basically removed. So if you've performed 10 interviews while in test mode, you would see those 10 interviews once the interviews are uploaded to the server. If you collect the 11th interview in test mode, then the first interview that you've conducted and uploaded will be removed. You will not see it. The same for the 12th, 13th, etc. So you will only be able to see a sliding window of the last 10 interviews that you've uploaded when you are in test mode. For that reason, you do need to remember to move your survey to production mode once you've finished your testing on the devices and just before starting your fieldwork. The last mode is closed. Once you've done with your data collection and all the data has been uploaded, and you don't want it to be exposed and used anymore by your interviewers to conduct additional interviews, you can simply move it to closed mode. In closed mode, the surveys would basically disappear from the data collection application. So as I mentioned, the surveyors would not be able to utilize them to conduct further additional interviews. For the moment, I'm leaving the survey that we've designed here in draft mode. The next thing that I would want to cover in this session is the Android app application. Everything that I'm going to cover right now for the Android application is similarly equivalent to the PC survey, but I'm only going to review the Android application in this session. So let's just recap. We've entered the basically the newly created account. We've created several additional users that make part of my organization. We've given those users permissions. The next thing that we've been doing was creating a new customer, my first customer in the customers and projects node, and I've created a new project that I'm going to be performing for that customer. The first thing that I've done was setting the permissions and defining the roles of the people that are going to be participating in this project. So as you remember, I used Mark and I defined Mark to be the project manager and also a quality control team member. This was done by right-clicking my project and selecting security settings. The next thing that I've done was creating a survey in my project. I've created a survey. We've added several questions to the survey. We've defined several question types. We configured several quality control settings for our survey. And we've configured a quota structure for that survey. We then added several surveyors to our organizations, and we've created my surveyor, and we've created a group of West surveyors, which we added my surveyor to that group, and we've assigned the West surveyor group to our project. After doing that, we went in and set up the quota targets for the specific surveyors that will take part in the project. The next thing that I'm gonna cover is the data collection application, and as I mentioned, I'm gonna be doing that on the Android application. For our session, I'm going to be using an Android emulator that is called BlueStacks, and everything that you're going to see within the BlueStacks is, of course, equivalent to the way this is going to be performed on any Android device. If you want to know how to obtain BlueStacks and install the SurveyToGo data collection application on it, you can always go to our knowledge base in our support portal and search for BlueStacks. So we'll first discuss how you install SurveyToGo on an Android device. There are basically two options. The first option is go to the Play Store. Search for SurveyToGo and you'll find the Android application on the Play Store. Simply click it and install it on your device. The other option is obtaining a URL of an APK file. So you can simply copy the APK, paste it on your browser, and basically press enter, and it will follow the same installation process as if you downloaded it from the Play Store. I've returned back to the support portal just to show you that if you want to know where to obtain the installation link of the Android application, you can always go to the to our knowledge base and search for Android install, and you'll see that I got both how to install SurveyToGo on BlueStacks as well as installing SurveyToGo for Android. And if you log in, you'll see that it describes the two options that we've mentioned. The first one is through the Play Store, and the second option is using the APK link that you can find in this short guide. I got back to my Android device, and I followed the installation, and you can see that there's a SurveyToGo icon appearing on the device. To open it, I simply click it, and I'm going to receive the login screen of the data collection application. You remember that I've defined a surveyor earlier that is called My Surveyor, and I'm going to be using that surveyor in order to log in to the data collection application. And in the organization, I'm going to use the account name that I've registered. So in this case, it is My SurveyToGo account, and I'm going to press login. So the first time I log in with the user, I'm going to be directed to the server, so the user can be verified and obtain the relevant information for that specific surveyor in that specific organization. This is the main screen that the surveyor is going to see when he logs into the data collection application, and as you can see, there are no surveys present. We'll discuss in a second how do we make the survey that we have created reach that device when My Surveyor logs in to the application. So first, let's discuss the various configuration options that the Android application has. Let me open the application menu and I'll go to options. And as you can see, there are various options that are available to configure. The most important one and relevant for this session is the automatic syncing. As you can see, there are several parts that can be defined whether to be automatically synced to the device or from the device, or you prefer to have the surveyor perform them manually. I will discuss in this session the two major items that are being synced to or from the device. The first one is the surveys. So the sync of the surveys that the surveyor has been assigned to. So the process that brings those surveys to the device. And the second process is the result syncing. So the upload of the interviews that have been conducted by that specific surveyor. By default, the automatic syncing is turned on. So every time that the application would be running on the device and would sense that the device is in a place where there is a connection, it would try to perform both survey and result syncing. It would contact the server to see if that specific surveyor has additional surveys that he needs to be working on, or if there were any updates on the surveys that he is assigned to, then the application would basically request a newer version of that survey. Regarding result syncing, all the completed interviews that specific surveyor has been conducted would be automatically uploaded to the server if the automatic syncing is turned on. You can of course change the sync interval. By default it's every 30 minutes, so every 30 minutes the application would try and perform the automatic syncing, so retrieve the surveys that need to be refreshed on the Android application if they were changed, or upload data if the surveyor has completed additional interviews in the past sync interval. You would normally want to leave this setting as checked. There are organizations that prefer to turn it off and have the surveyor manually perform the survey syncs and the result syncs. This is normally due to places where the wireless data is still relatively expensive, and the devices have a 3G connectivity enabled on them. So normally those organizations would want the automatic syncing or the transfer of data of surveys to the device and results to the servers not to be done automatically, but rather have the surveyor reach a place where a Wi-Fi exists and then perform the required sync. As I mentioned, the default setting is to have the automatic syncing turned on, and this would ensure that the syncing process is happening regularly and no one forgets to sync either newer version of surveys if exists or completed interviews to the server. I will now get back to the main window of the data collection application. Those of you who were quick were able to see that I received a synchronizing surveys message on the bottom of the window, which means that the automatic syncing basically kicked in. But since we do not have active surveys that this surveyor is assigned to, we didn't get any surveys to the surveys list in this window. One important thing that you can see on the right side is that circle. That circle is an indicator to the surveyor that the application can utilize and receives valid location or GPS information from the Android operating system. This is a good recommendation when briefing surveyors, to make sure that if, as I mentioned, SurveyToGo comes in with several quality control capabilities, which one of them is the ability to tag each interview with the location where it was conducted. For this to happen, we need the application to receive a valid location data from the Android operating system, meaning that either the device has a GPS and is within an area that a location data can be obtained, and you can see whether the application can receive valid location information or not by that circle. If the circle is empty, as you see it right now, it does not. I'm using an emulator, so of course the location information is not available for me. If the circle is full, then it means that the application has valid location information. So before starting an interview, you can always brief the surveyors to check whether the data collection application receives valid GPS location information, and if not, we have a detailed guide on our knowledge base on what are the various steps or checks that you would need to perform in order to make sure that the application receives valid location information. For example, if you're using GPS normally would not receive information data within buildings. So there are instructions there on what you should do in those cases. One more aspect that I want to cover in this stage is the offline capability of SurveyToGo. As I mentioned, SurveyToGo is an offline CAPI solution that allows your surveyors to basically perform the entire work when offline, in areas where a connection is not available. For the surveyors to be able to conduct interviews on surveys when offline, they first have to be, of course, connected at least once. So the surveys they are assigned to can be synced to the device. From that moment on, the surveyors can basically utilize those surveys to conduct interviews as much as required. And when done, they can reach an area where there is a connection, and all the completed interviews that have been basically kept on the application on the device would then be uploaded to the server. So initially a connection is required to get the surveys to the application, and then at the end of the process to upload the interviews to the server. As you can see in this case, even though my surveyor has been assigned to the project and we have a survey in this project, we do not see any surveys on the surveys list of the application when connecting with this surveyor. The reason is, and if you remember we discussed the survey modes, is that our survey is in draft mode. In draft mode, the surveys are not being uploaded or synced to the devices. They're only available from the studio to the scripter, because normally in this stage the scripter is still working on the survey, and in that stage he would be using the emulator to test his logic, as we've explained. So what I'm going to do right now is go back to my studio and move my survey to test mode. As I mentioned, there are two options, either from here or from here. If I have the survey open, I can do it from here, but I'll do it from the settings menu. I would simply select the test mode and click OK. I would now go back to my SurveyToGo application on the device, and as I've mentioned, test mode surveys are supposed to be synced to the device. We saw that our interval is quite quite long, so it only kicks in every several minutes. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to manually kick in the sync surveys process. So how do I do that? I go to the menu and I select the sync surveys. And as you can see, my survey has appeared on my surveys list. So my surveyor can now utilize it to conduct interviews. If my surveyor was assigned to more surveys, you would see all those surveys in this list. As you can see, each survey includes here several details like the number of interviews that have been conducted and are still on the device, were not yet completed or uploaded to the server. The number of attachments that we have that have been collected in the survey and have not yet been uploaded, and the survey version. Regarding the survey version, I'm just going to mention that every time a survey is saved, the version of that survey is incremented by 1. So when I just create a survey, its version is 1, and every time that I save changes that I've made, the version increases by 1. This allows us to basically control the fact that we would want to know that our surveyors are actually using the latest version, or if interviews have been conducted and uploaded that were not done with the latest survey version, at least we would know it and be able to understand mismatches in data if we have any. So one of the things that you would brief your surveyors normally is just before moving this survey into production, you would probably know what the version of that survey is. Let's say it's 25. Then at that stage you would say you would instruct all your surveyors to ensure that the survey that they have on their devices is at least from version 25. If a major change has been made to the survey during production, because for example you forgot one question and you've added it while the survey was in production, that is not a problem. There are certain changes that are allowed during production that would not impact the data. Then let's assume that this increased this survey version to 26. Then you would instruct all your surveyors to ensure that further interviews are done with version 26 and on. And you know that your surveyors are able to see what version of the survey they have on their devices. If they don't have version 26 and on, then you would instruct them to sync surveys, as I've just done manually. I just want to mention one important note here, that as I mentioned, there are things that you can change during production when working when a survey is in field, but there are certain changes that are not allowed. This is explained in one of the guides on our knowledge base. What are the changes that are safe in production and what should not be done in production. But if you have any doubt during your production work, simply contact our support and we'll be able to let you know if what you're trying to do will impact the collected data or does not have any bad impact on the data that has been collected already with the with previous versions of the survey. So we have the survey on our Android data collection application. The next thing that we're going to do, and that's what the surveyor is going to do, is basically click this survey to enter the specific survey view. And as you can see, there are several parts to the to that view. The first part is the summary of what has been done with the survey and is still on the device. So how many interviews were conducted, and out of those, how many are not completed and are still on the device. As I mentioned, only completed interviews get uploaded to the server. The non-completed interviews remain on the device until they are completed. And the completed interviews that have not been yet uploaded to the server. What is the reason that they may not have been yet uploaded to the server? Either because you've turned off the automatic syncing that we've seen before, or because the device is in a place where there's no connection. What you can see on the bottom part is three tabs. First of all is the quotas, so you can see the quotas that we've assigned to that specific surveyor. And as interviews get done, you would see that the zero increases. So that provides a very good guidance to the surveyor. What are the quotas that he is still or she is still missing, and guide him with what type of respondents he would need to be looking for. Another tab that we can see here is the 6 weeks history, and that tab would basically, that view would show the surveyor or a supervisor, if a supervisor would want to look at what the surveyor has been doing on the device, would show the summary of what has been done by that surveyor on that device, how many interviews were started, how many get completed, how many were uploaded, etc. Under the conducted view, you'll be able to see all the interviews that have not yet been either completed or completed interviews that have not yet been uploaded to the server. So basically what the surveyor would do at that stage, he would press the run button to enter the to start an interview. And this probably looks familiar to you. This is the survey that we've created, and what we can do is simply fill in the data, and let's select the age range. Okay, and I can see here that my quota has exceeded. Why? Because if I will go and look, I am only supposed to interview males in the ranges of 19 to 40. Okay, so this is what I'm gonna basically do right now. I'm going to look for such a person and say I'm very good today and thank you for your time. And you can see that I have here a conducted interview that has been completed, and if you've noticed, the interview disappeared. The interview disappeared because it got synced to the server. It was uploaded to the server. As I mentioned, the automatic syncing is turned on by default, and when the completed interview was done on the device, then the automatic syncing of results basically uploaded it to the server. As you've seen, we've seen that we had numbers conducted, completed, etc. on the survey information summary, and once the interview got uploaded to the server, then it zeroed back. So basically what you would see here is the current status of what the application currently holds on the device. So you'd be able to immediately see if there are the main thing that would be able to see here is if there are completed interviews that you have not synced yet. If we look at the quotas, you can see that there's one one interview that basically used one of those quotas. And if I look at the 6 weeks history, you can see that there was one interview that got cancelled. You remember the first one that I started got cancelled because I used the wrong or an age range that I don't have a quota for. One interview got completed, and that interview also got uploaded. Cancelled interviews, by the way, are not saved on the device, so cancelled interviews are deleted from the device database. I would now start another interview, and maybe at Jake. I'm gonna interview Jake, and Jake is a male, and for some reason Jake needs to take a break now. He has some urgent call or some urgent thing that he needs to be doing, and he told me that he needs to go, and I'll be able to continue interviewing him in half an hour. So at that point, what I can do is I can select to exit my interview and save it, so I'll be able to continue it later. And I select to save it. And if we now go to the conducted view, what you can see is the interview that I've just saved. If I right click it, I can see that there are 2 options. The first one is the ability to view the information that has been already collected with this. This can be beneficial for the surveyor, just to understand where the interview was stopped, or just review the information just before continuing. This can also be used by supervisors who want to look at the interviews that have been started on the device by that surveyor. The other thing that I can do here is, of course, continue, and I'll continue from the same point where I stopped. So I will select not bad, and would complete the interview, and you would see that that interview would basically get uploaded again, because I'm at an area where there's connection. I'm connected, of course, and if we review the quotas, you'd see that I've been basically consumed another quota from my defined target. And you'll be able to see that I now have 2 completed interviews that have also been uploaded. So that basically covers the first part of the session, where we logged into the account. We've created our users, we've defined a customer and a project, and built a survey that takes part of this project. Then we've created surveyors, we've assigned them to the project, and we moved the survey to a mode that the survey can be then synced to the data collection application. We've logged into the data collection application as the surveyor, and we've seen how the sync process works, and how the surveys that specific surveyor is assigned to are being synced to the device. We then saw how you conduct interviews, and what is the information that the surveyor can consult on the device in order to understand what he has been doing, and be able to continue interviews that he had to stop in the middle for various reasons. The next thing that we're going to review is how you basically manage, monitor, and control the data that is now uploaded from our surveyors to to the server as the project progresses.